I used to work in low-income home weatherization, basically giving free stuff away to help lower electricity and gas bills and make the home more comfortable for people who really needed it, installing doors and insulation and so forth. One step in qualifying a home is testing combustion appliances to make sure they're not emitting carbon monoxide into the living space. Because if they are, and we seal up the house, we could kill the whole family. During a pre-inspection of a home on the outskirts of the city, I ask to see the owner's water heater. He tells me that it's in the basement, which is fairly normal, and I tell him I have to inspect it before work can start. So he goes into the kitchen and starts moving the refrigerator. Turns out the entry into the basement is underneath carpeting beneath the fridge. I should note that I went and did thousands of homes over the years and had never seen such a thing. But whatever, needs to be done regardless. And so I pull out my flashlight and shine it down the stairs to check out the layout, but really to look for black widow spiders because, fuck black widows. At this point, I notice a dead cat, mostly down to a skeleton. Not my favorite sight, but really common in crawl spaces and basements. I take a few steps down the stairs and continue my spider check, and notice another couple of small animal skeletons. At this point, I start to worry about gas, or poisons, or something equally dangerous, and start looking closer. There are animal skeletons everywhere, at least 10 on a cursory look. Some of them are so degraded I can't determine what they used to be. I also happen to notice that this guy is waiting at the entrance a little too quietly, with his hand on the door. Something clicks in my brain, and I get this immense sense of danger. I'm about 4 steps from the door being clear to close. I have no partner on the job with me. There's death all around me, and I realize just how hidden the entrance to the basement really was. I noped out, told the guy I needed extra tools and would be back, and marked the job as non-feasible for health and safety as I was driving away. I have no idea if I was actually in any danger. It could have been completely innocent, but I still remember the adrenaline rush and sense of doom, and sometimes you just don't take chances. Obligatory, oh my god, first gold ever. Thanks, kind stranger. Edit. I'm getting asked frequently if I reported this guy to the police, and there's a lot of concern about the dead animals. I did not file a formal report, mainly because nothing I saw was entirely out of the ordinary. Crawl spaces and basements have venting at the base of the house, and it's really common for animals to squeeze in and then not be able to get back out. If you have space under your house, there's a decent chance something has died down there. You get used to it when your job takes you down there frequently. Now, this was an extreme case, and clearly everything put together raised concern enough for me to get the fuck out. But the sad fact of working with low-income families is that you see how lousy their lives can be. You learn not to do anything to make their lives any harder. And I took a lot of pride from the fact that my job made their lives just a bit better. I didn't think that my being scared for a minute was enough to involve the police. You know? Rural England. Beautiful. Or so you would have thought. But there is always something bad hiding behind a tranquil mask. 6 years ago, I quit my job and moved to a small village, as far away as possible from any big towns or cities. It wasn't that I was running from something or had overdue bills. I just wanted a change. I thought that living in a quiet place would be soul-cleansing and peaceful, somewhere that people would leave me alone. I have never been more wrong. On a frosty day in late January, I decided to take a walk through the woods 2 miles north of my house. There was something hugely freeing about being alone in these woods. It was as if the trees and the sky were the only company I needed. For a change, I decided to take a different path than the one I usually took. I don't know why, but for the first time in 6 years, I did. Hours later, I realized that I had not met up with the main path again. Although slightly concerned, I carried on walking on the rapidly narrowing track, presuming that I'd end up somewhere I recognized soon enough. 3 hours went by, and I had no clue where I was. Twilight had crept upon me, and the light was quickly fading. At this point, I began to panic. I badly wanted to turn back, but found my feet carrying me forwards as if I was no longer in control. Suddenly, I was filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. Like the trees and the sky were no longer my companions, but demons, watching me with the hatred of the devil himself. I didn't feel welcome in this forest anymore. Something wasn't right. I looked ahead of me and saw something on the path. It appeared to be silk of some kind. As I got closer, I slowly came to the realization that it was not silk I looked upon, but blood. The blood was fresh and had stained the frost around it. But perhaps the most horrifying part was that the blood was still seeping through the frost, like it had just been spilled. I hadn't fully processed what I was seeing when I heard a noise from further in the wood, the sound of a twig snapping, and a voice. It was a man's voice. He lay ahead of me, naked from the waist up. He appeared to be bleeding from the chest, a thick trickle of blood oozing slowly from a hole there. The man looked at me and whimpered, "Help me." I stood there for a moment, terrified and confused about how this could be happening. "Help me," the man repeated, even quieter this time. "Please." I approached him cautiously. By the time I had reached his side, he couldn't do more than whisper. I tore off the sleeve of my shirt and held it against his chest, using the remnants of my water to wet the rag. He lay there with his arm over his eyes, weeping softly. He was young, probably early 30s, with long dark hair and a rough beard. He looked like he hadn't had a shower in months, and his hands were shaking violently. I checked my phone. No service. "What happened to you?" I asked him. He breathed heavily and began to sit up. "They did this to me," he wept. "They did this to me." I stared at him in disbelief. "Who did this to you?" I responded. At this, he grasped my hand as tightly as he could and looked me dead in the eyes. "The tree men." He took one final breath, and then he died. I knelt there, with this body at my feet, and no idea what to do with it. Should I call the police? Run? Bury it? I had no clue. I was so shaken up by the events I had just witnessed. I got up and ran, not looking back once. I finally made it to a place that I recognized, and from there, I followed the path home. For the next 5 nights, I had the same recurring dream. The dream of a man being chased through a wood that I recognized, falling to the ground, and an unnaturally large being standing over him. The dreams cut off at that point, and I can only hope that they never go any further. I often wonder if I should return to the woods or tell anyone about what I saw, but always decided against it. I guess some things are best left unknown. But there is something in my head, asking the burning question, who are the tree men, and what do they do if they catch you? I grew up in a village so small that to an outsider, it was as if time had forgotten it. The roads were narrow, winding, and often obscured by dense fog rolling down from the hills. The forest surrounded us on 3 sides, its ancient trees towering like sentries, dark and foreboding even in daylight. It was an isolated place, the kind of village where everyone knew each other and secrets were kept like heirlooms. One night, I found myself breaking one of the village's oldest, most sacred rules. Never go into the forest after dark. It was during the annual harvest festival that things took a turn. The entire village gathered at the town square, a tradition held to give thanks for the year's bounty. I was walking back home alone, a bit later than I should have, the distant sounds of laughter and music fading behind me. The road home passed close to the forest's edge, a place I usually hurried past without a second glance. That night, something caught my eye, a faint, flickering light within the trees. At first, I thought it was a firefly or a trick of the light. But as I watched, the glow moved, weaving between the trees as though beckoning me deeper into the woods. Curiosity got the better of me. I'd heard tales of strange lights appearing in the forest, stories of ghosts or spirits lost between worlds, but I'd always dismissed them as folklore. Now standing there, something about that light called to me, urging me to step off the path and into the unknown. With each step, the light seemed to grow closer, brighter, until I found myself in a small clearing surrounded by ancient oaks. The air was thick and heavy, carrying a strange metallic scent that made me uneasy. I wanted to turn back, but my body wouldn't obey. It was as though an invisible thread was pulling me forward. Then, the light flickered out, plunging me into darkness. I froze, my heart racing as my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight filtering through the trees. That's when I saw it, something standing just beyond the edge of the clearing. At first, it looked like a person, tall and thin, with limbs that seemed too long and a head cocked at an unnatural angle. But as I looked closer, I realized it was covered in something like moss or vines, blending with the forest in a way that made it almost invisible. It was watching me, and though it had no eyes, I could feel its gaze, cold and piercing. I tried to move, but my feet felt rooted to the ground, as if the forest itself were holding me in place. Slowly, the figure lifted one arm, and a bony hand extended toward me, its fingers curling as if beckoning me closer. My heart pounded in my chest, and a deep, primal fear gripped me. Whatever this thing was, it was no mere spirit or ghost. It was something older, something dark, and I could feel its hunger. With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free of whatever hold the creature had over me, and ran. Branches clawed at my skin, roots threatened to trip me, but I didn't stop. I could hear something behind me, a soft rustling, like leaves stirred by an unseen wind. I didn't dare look back, knowing that if I did, I might see it right on my heels, reaching out to drag me into the shadows. Finally, I burst out of the trees and onto the village road, collapsing onto the ground, gasping for air. I glanced back, half expecting to see it standing at the edge of the forest, watching me. But there was nothing, only the quiet, looming darkness of the trees. When I made it back to my house, I locked every door and window, my hands shaking as I slid the last bolt into place. I didn't sleep that night, haunted by the memory of that figure and the strange, unnatural hunger in its empty gaze. The next morning, I went to see old Merrick, one of the village's elders and the keeper of our oldest stories. He was known for his knowledge of the supernatural and the hidden things that lurked beyond the borders of our world. When I described what I'd seen, his face grew pale, and he shook his head, muttering something under his breath. "You saw the Wendigo," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A spirit of the forest, cursed by hunger and bound to wander, forever seeking those who stray too close. He told me that the Wendigo was a creature of ancient evil, a being cursed by its own greed and hunger. It was said to lure people into the woods, drawing them closer with flickering lights or whispers on the wind. Once it's seen you, Marek warned, it will follow you. You'll feel it watching, hear it calling in your dreams. And if you go back into the woods, it will take you." True to Marek's words, I began to feel the Wendigo's presence everywhere. Shadows lingered at the edge of my vision. Strange noises filled the night, and that metallic scent hung in the air around me, as if the forest itself were bleeding. I tried to avoid the woods, but the Wendigo was relentless. It would come to me in my dreams, its hollow eyes burning with hunger, its bony fingers reaching out to pull me into darkness. I would wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing, feeling as though I'd narrowly escaped some unseen danger. The villagers began to notice my change, the dark circles under my eyes, the way I flinched at shadows. Some of them whispered that I was cursed, that I'd brought something back with me from the forest. They avoided me, leaving me alone with my terror. One night, the dreams grew worse, more vivid, as if the Wendigo were trying to drag me into its world. I knew that I couldn't escape it forever, that it would continue to haunt me until it finally claimed me. Desperate, I returned to the forest, carrying a small lantern and the charm Marek had given me, a bundle of herbs and bones meant to ward off evil. The forest was silent as I stepped inside, the air heavy with the scent of decay. As I walked deeper into the woods, the shadows thickened, and I could feel the Wendigo's presence growing stronger, pressing in on me from all sides. My lantern flickered, casting eerie shadows across the trees, and then there it was, the Wendigo, standing in the path before me, its hollow gaze fixed on me. It was even more terrifying than I remembered, its body twisted and skeletal, its skin stretched tight over jagged bones. Its mouth opened in a silent scream, revealing rows of sharp, broken teeth. I held up the charm, chanting the words Marek had taught me, hoping it would be enough to keep the creature at bay. But the Wendigo didn't flinch. It stepped closer, reaching out with its long, bony fingers, its empty eyes burning with a hunger that seemed endless. In a final act of desperation, I hurled the charm at the creature and ran. I could hear it behind me, its footsteps silent, but its presence a weight pressing down on me, suffocating me. I pushed myself to run faster, my legs burning as I stumbled through the darkness. Somehow, I made it out of the forest, collapsing onto the village road. The Wendigo stopped at the tree line, watching me with those hollow eyes, its mouth twisted in a grim smile. I knew it would wait, biding its time, watching and hungering. Since that night, I've been haunted by the Wendigo. I feel its gaze on me whenever I pass the forest, its whispers filling my dreams, calling me back to the darkness. I know that it's only a matter of time before it claims me, before I'm pulled into the shadows, lost to the hunger of the forest. They say that once you've seen the Wendigo, you belong to it, bound by a curse that can never be broken. And now, as I write these words, I can feel its presence stronger than ever, lurking just beyond the edge of the light, waiting patiently, eternally hungry.